What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Other Side of the Firewall podcast, where we talk about the latest and greatest of cybersecurity news, as well as we highlight those movers and shakers and glass ceiling breakers, those people of color who made it to the other side of the proverbial firewall. My name is Ryan Williams, and as always, I'm joined by Shan Tynes.
What's up? What's up?
And Chris Epcon.
What's going on, everybody?
What's going on? So, welcome to another episode of the podcast. So, Monday and Tuesday are topics. Today, Wednesday, the discussion. Thursdays, Ask a CISSP, where I interview somebody who is, moving and shaking within the community. I do have one. I just got to get it out the door, so you should see that shortly, hopefully. And then Fridays, everything else, movies, books, games, all that cool stuff. But without further ado, I give it to Shannon.
All right, everybody. So this article is from thehackernews.com. And it just says written by the Hacker News. So it's multiple people, I guess, right? But it's called Identity, the New Cybersecurity Battleground, right? And so nothing is more accurate than this, right? So like not having properly formatted identity techniques when it comes to accessing your IT assets or even financial things or anything of that nature. Like, this is a problem, right? This is how a lot of these bad actors are getting in, is they're playing on identity-based attacks, right? So we talk about it every week, right? About, oh, what has happened here? Well, okay, identity credentials of some sort have been compromised, right? Or they're not properly integrated into these systems to where this is the foothold that people are getting their foot in the door to these different systems, right? And so identity should 100% be like the basis. Like we always talk about with cybersecurity, like you need to do it. You need to start from the beginning with cybersecurity, but like you have to dig into that a little bit more. Like, okay, well, how does the cybersecurity need to be? It's not enough that I have, just some type of antivirus or something along those lines, or some type of firewall, right? Local to systems or whatever it may be, or even on the network firewalls, local firewalls for systems. Like it's defense in depth, but the identity portion of it, like if you fail there, like all of that is for naught at that point, right? Like, what did you do all that for if you have poor identity verification to where somebody can get in so very easily, right? So this is one of those things where this is where we talk more about like your multi-factor authentication, right? Like, okay, I believe you're who you are, but tell it to me twice, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, prove it to me twice. You're who you say you are, right? I don't just want to take your word for it, just using username and password, right? And we've talked about it in the past about being passwordless in the future, right? I know Microsoft is trying to go down that road and hitting it up pretty heavy, but this is something that definitely needs to be addressed, because if you fail on this front, like everything you do after that is all for naught. Doesn't matter how great a fortress you have if you just leave the front door open. You know what I mean? But Chris, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, identity is, really, if you look at any of the NIST frameworks, right? Like access control is imperative, and it's usually it is, if not the most highly, I would say, there's let's just say there's a ton of controls on access control.
It's critical, yeah, it's critical.
It's critical, right? A lot of its stuff is critical, right? So when companies are looking at solutions, they have to remember, right, that, hey, I'm going to employ and implement this SaaS-based identity provider and integrate it into all of my SaaS systems, right, or our SaaS products that we use. So what you have to understand is, just because you integrate something or you throw or bolt on a piece of security, a security system into something, doesn't mean it's completely secure. Let's say you're utilizing Okta or some other SSO or federated identity management, SaaS solution, right? Still, a lot of the times, organizations still have their own instances of Active Directory. It might be on-premise, or it might be on cloud for Entra ID, Microsoft, or AWS, right? Or their version of Active Directory, right? So that sense, right, that still needs to be secured, right? Access to the reference monitor, rather, where they pull those identities from, still has to be secured. Then you're thinking about all these integrations with my Salesforce platform, ServiceNow, and all that. Those are API integrations, and those need to be secured as well through some type of continuous analysis and risk analysis to be conducted. So at the end of the day, I think information security managers, or if you don't have one, employ a third party to help assist you with that. Have them conduct a risk assessment and have them look into your environment and say, hey, where are potential areas of risk? Where are threats, and where can we mitigate those risks? And then ensure that we can protect our environment, right? And that's really what it comes down to. And when you look at all the news articles, a lot of it's like, they get access through like some kind of phishing attack or some email. People click an email and boom, like your identity is compromised, or at least your digital credentials are compromised, right? They stole the cookies or something for your session, and bang, they're in the environment. And then somehow they find they weasel their way into administrative access, privilege escalation, right? Because it turns out the guy that they hacked into, his rights weren't revoked, right? So that's the kind of stuff that we're thinking about. Like, it's proper access control and account management procedures and processes for an organization, right? So Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Again, I think you guys are spot on. The only thing that I thought the article was great, but I think the only thing I take umbrage with is the idea that the tech stack not being homogenous is causing issues. Because, like, hey, when I was an airman, we loved Cisco, we loved Juniper, we loved Brocade. We didn't like them all being integrated into the same environment. It was a training nightmare, right? Because a lot of us were brought up on Cisco, or we may have dabbled a little bit in a different box, so to speak. It was a matter of like keeping people around who knew the information and could train the trainers, right? And then losing them through attrition. So it was always like, it's best to have a pretty homogeneous stack, and it's easier to train. However, what we've seen over the past few years is that having a mixed environment can be a benefit, right? So remember, Ivanti had a huge compromise in their secure VPN. So it affected government agencies across the board. Like CISA had to push out a whole warning, as well as the FBI, saying, hey, if you have Ivanti, you need to patch this immediately. It's a 0-day, right? And it's because it was adopted so widely that it caused everyone to have basically a hole in their security. In that regard, I think having a mixed environment is a little bit safer. For the most part, you're gonna have your pros and cons, right? Like, it is hard to train when you have a mixed environment, but at the same time, you don't want everyone to be as vulnerable as everyone else, right? You want to have it where certain agencies aren't impacted, or because your tech stack was varied, it wasn't easy for the bad guys to get in, things of that nature. But that's my IT hat, right? So take that off for a second. I think Chris hit home the access management piece of the onboarding, offboarding, right? Like, you have to properly terminate people. So you have to have TTPs, SOPs, run books, whatever, to properly integrate your HR with your configuration management, or whomever in your organization takes care of accounts, to properly provision them and to terminate them when the person is leaving. And I think that's a big piece of it, because we saw a lot last year where we had a lot of really big insider threats because they just didn't terminate the person. So they logged back in, they caused mass chaos. Like, we had the one guy, I believe he was overseas, who logged in and completely handicapped a large organization. And I think he was going to serve time and pay a fine. And that easily avoided, right? Like, because we take the time to lock up all the cabinets and to make sure the right people have the keys, and we have visitor logs and secure cameras. Like, we take care of the physical piece very well. But I think we often don't challenge those procedures in the onboarding and offboarding. Like, I bet you I could probably log into some old company accounts somewhere, one of the various companies I worked for, and still pull files and things of that nature, right? So it comes in. Go ahead, Shen.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that also rolls over into the continuous monitoring piece as well, right? Like, are you looking for exfiltration and things of that nature? So it hits a few different targets. But what are you about to say, Shannon?
So it does come down to a cyber hygiene thing, right? And it matters about how integrative you are, right? I'll say that. So like, I could tell you in my job, at least, like, it's not just, I don't just support one unit, right? There are multiple units, right? And because those units don't directly report necessarily to us, like, it's hard sometimes. Like, sometimes I hear secondhand that someone has left or got another job or something like that. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, they have an account with us. They didn't out process. They didn't follow. Like, I would have normally seen something that, that, goes through us to be like, yep, we'll check. They have this account, this account, this account. We'll get rid of it. Right. But it doesn't always happen that way. So as a lot of these corporations become integrative with other corporations, right? Like, that's kind of what you run into, is that the procedures need to be ironed out to say anybody who has access to this needs to go through this procedure. And it's not necessarily the case.
And I think a lot of that comes down to just having the right people in the room more frequently. Because like, if you weren't in that meeting, you would never find out, right? And I've experienced that in tabletops where you got a bunch of people sitting around and going through procedures, they're like, hey, listen, you're thinking about X, Y, or Z. And like, well, this table never shows up to these meetings. They're never invited, right? Like oftentimes the IT team isn't invited to the same meetings as the rest of the organization because it made things too complicated. Well, you kind of need to know how these things work. So you don't run into issues like this, especially when it comes to identity and access management, right? I think it's more widespread than people like to believe, especially when it comes to the integration of HR and the rest of the team. Like usually they don't cross streams, right? Like you only care about HR when you're onboarding or when you're in trouble. Mm-hmm. But they have a very significant role when it comes to promotions and additions and things of that nature. And like, is that built into your SOPs to capture that, to say, okay, so-and-so is now moving departments. So now they need access to this VLAN versus that VLAN. They need access to these resources versus those resources. And as opposed to finding on the back end, and then it can start kind of murky because people don't necessarily remove access when they give access and things. You know what I mean? Like trouble tickets get jumbled. Sometimes people get a little lazy, right? Cyber hygiene. So you hope that you have an organization that's a little bit more flat where these people are having those conversations so that they understand how important they are to one another when it comes to giving people permissions and access, which we know is one of the worst kept secrets, because we've all been in situations like, why is the IT people here? Why are you guys in the meeting? Well, a lot of what you do is dependent upon us. So I don't know, but I think it was a really good discussion.
That's when you say to them, well, you ain't asking why I'm here when your Facebook is down. Like then all
right. When you can't get to your YouTubes.
Yeah.
Play your Spotify's in the background, right? And things of that nature. But yeah, I just think it is getting better. I think it is getting more flat, at least from the perspective of, okay, we need to have these people integrated because like we're working from home, or I've seen it where your exec is also in charge of your O365, right? Because you just don't have the manpower. So like this person is just learning on the fly, and that could be good because their hygiene might be a little bit tighter because they're, worried. And they're learning the training, but at the same time, they're not as invested as, your actual IT people might be in knowing the process. I digress. Definitely continue to hit us up throughout the week. So again, Monday and Tuesday are topics, Wednesday discussion, Thursdays Ask a CISSP, and then Fridays everything else, movies, books, games, all that cool stuff. Definitely check us out on all the platforms that we're available on. So you got the Repton Tech, you have Heroes Media Group, you have, of course, our YouTube, and then all of our audio platforms. But now we're also on the radio, so 99.1 FM in the Atlanta metro area, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, and then also Channel 10 in Fairfax, D.C., public access. So definitely hit up all those things, hit up all the websites that go by our name, the other side of the Firewall, the other side of the FW, or Ask a CISSP. Hit me up personally at RyRy Security Guy. That's RyRy Security Guy. You can find me pretty much everywhere, but LinkedIn is where I will probably respond. And where can they find you, Chris?
You can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Chris Abacon, last name spelled A. Bacon.
There it is. Stay safe. Stay secure.